Part 1. Saving souls and contending against heresies is a false dichotomy, as both are needed. Part 2. Ex-new creation and church member, Peter Ho's appeal. To NCCS and APCCS to take action against the wolf, Joseph Prince, because it is an urgent matter of life and death as millions of souls hang in the balance. Part 3. The difference between Charlie Kirk's and Joseph Prince's conception of discipleship is the difference between obeying Christ's command in the Great Commission and rebelling against it. Part 4. How Charlie Kirk's memorial is changing, Mike Winger. Part 1. Saving souls and contending against heresies is a false dichotomy, as both are needed. The Public Seminar by George Ong on Joseph Prince's teachings on 28th February, 2026 Saturday, and 7th March 2026 Saturday, as announced in my last article, will be held at the Go Yue Kang Auditorium at Eagle Center, 166 Bukit Merah Central, Unit 04-3531, Singapore, 150166. As I have explained, members of New Creation Church are most welcome to attend, especially Joseph Prince and his pastors. If Joseph Prince claims to be preaching the true gospel, then he and his pastors should have no fear to dialogue and debate with me in the seminar. Only if Joseph Prince preaches the false gospel would he be fearful to meet me, as what he preaches would be resoundingly exposed. Why? Because Joseph Prince has simply no defense at all against the plenty of videos about what he said that I have marshaled as concrete evidence against him, and would unveil for the whole world to see. Let me reiterate that if Joseph Prince wants me to meet him at his home ground at Star Vista in March next year, 2026, I will be more than happy to oblige. I want to correct something that is unhelpful that is spread among Christians and even pastors in Singapore. It is that contending against the heresies of Joseph Prince has nothing to do with saving souls, and that we should stop what we are doing and start saving souls. Who says fighting for truth against heresies has nothing to do with saving souls? I have met with those whom I had initially thought were mature believers, but by the way they reasoned things out, I then discovered they were actually rather naive in their thinking. I have people who say to me, "George, please don't spend so much time debunking Joseph Prince's teachings. You ought to spend your time saving souls." Such a comment can only come from those who are simplistic in their thinking and shallow in their theology. Contending for truth against false teachers and their false doctrines is every bit related to saving souls. In a teaching session, Vadi Baucham said,
Secondly, coming from that, now let's get down and look at verse 3 more closely. Beloved, although I was eager to write you about our common salvation, I found it necessary to write appealing to you to contend for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. Here's the second thing. There is this false dichotomy that is often presented. What we need to be about is the salvation of souls, not all these disagreements. Because if our passion is for souls, then we can let all the rest of that stuff go, and we can just go and pursue the salvation of souls, because nothing's more important than the salvation of souls. He obliterates the false dichotomy. There is no either or there. There is no either we unite in our passion for souls or we quibble about issues. There is no either or there. The apostle would argue that because of our desire for souls, we must contend for the purity of the gospel. It is our desire for souls that compels us to contend for the purity of the gospel. But if what we believe is a tainted gospel and a perverted gospel, then we are calling into question the very concept of salvation itself. There is no either or dichotomy here. We must be passionate about souls, and we must be passionate about contending for truth. We must be passionate about contending for truth because we're passionate about souls.
George Ong's comments. Contending for truth against false teachers and their false doctrines is every bit related to saving souls, which Vadi Baucham has so convincingly and passionately argued for. The argument that instead of focusing on doctrine, one should focus on saving souls is being simplistic. It is not either or, but rather both must be passionately striven for. Paul was a perfect example of one who preached the gospel passionately to save souls, yet at the same time he fought the heretics so consummately that he was prepared to curse them. It is clear that in Paul's life and ministry, he never sees this issue as either or, but both preaching the gospel and contending against heretics must be done passionately. Doctrine is as important as saving souls, given the fact that since the Pseudo-Grace gospel preached by Joseph Prince is false, many souls that are supposedly saved are not saved at all. How can souls be truly saved if a false gospel is preached? Many are too short-sighted to see that the one who is fighting heretics like Joseph Prince is in effect saving souls by preventing the heaven-bound from being deceived by his heretical false gospel and becoming hell-bound. While many save souls by preaching to the unsaved to deliver them from hell, others do it by warning the saved to prevent them from falling back into it. Saving souls is not only to be defined as delivering a lost sheep from hell, but also in deterring a saved sheep from returning to it. Is it any wonder that there are so many goats in the church that have to be reconverted into sheep because of the preaching of an incomplete justification only without sanctification and a no repentance false gospel by Joseph Prince? The great and frightening deception is that there are many sheep in New Creation Church who are actually goats in sheep's clothing without them even realizing it. Hence, saving souls is also to be seen as shaking the many goats in the church from their presumption that they are heaven-bound, in order that they may become the few sheep that will finally enter in. Finally, what must arrest our attention is that can the resources that are spent on saving souls from hell be justifiable if, through our negligence, nonchalance, and apathy, many of these saved souls who are being seduced by the pseudo-grace doctrine of Joseph Prince are falling back to it? What's the use of spending tons of money and energy on saving the multitudes of souls from hell, when little or no effort is devoted to preventing them from being enticed by the pseudo-grace doctrine of Joseph Prince and returning to it? If the battle for truth is lost, the battle for souls would also be lost, as the false gospel of Joseph Prince would only lead them to nowhere else, except to hell. George Ong said, "If truth is spoken without grace, an earthly reprimand is to be expected, but if grace is preached without truth, eternal ruin will be the consequence." While we rejoice with churches and Christians for their godly and timely efforts at winning souls, why are there so few who do the same to us by encouraging us in our battle against Joseph Prince's heresies? In fact, many, including pastors, pour cold water and even oppose our efforts to expose Joseph Prince as a heretic. Something is not quite right, but seriously and scripturally wrong here. Let me reiterate what Vadi Bakum said.
The apostle would argue that because of our desire for souls, we must contend for the purity of the gospel. It is our desire for souls that compels us to contend for the purity of the gospel. But if what we believe is a tainted gospel and a perverted gospel, then we are calling into question the very concept of salvation itself. There is no either or dichotomy here. We must be passionate about souls, and we must be passionate about contending for truth. We must be passionate about contending for truth because we're passionate about souls.
Because we have created a false dichotomy between winning souls and contending against heresies, resulting in the total neglect of contending against Joseph Prince's heretical gospel, that have resulted in its worldwide spread, we are now laden with this indictment we ourselves have created that is best encapsulated in my original quote. Singapore, instead of being known as the Antioch of Asia, is now more popularly and shamefully known as the world's #1 exporter of the Joseph Prince's Pseudo-Grace heresy. Can you now see that our neglect to contend for the truth against Joseph Prince's heresies has resulted in the sabotage of our very aim to be the Antioch of Asia to win souls? David Pawson had sadly talked about the spread of Joseph Prince's Pseudo-Grace heresy from Singapore and to the world. In a teaching session in Singapore, David Pawson said,
"And frankly, I'm here in Singapore because of one wrong meaning of that word. Because 2 years I was in South Africa, and every church I went to was talking about grace, but in a rather unusual way. And a way that was dangerous, a way that was mixing a lot of truth with some poisonous error. And it's that mixture which can so easily deceive people. And I said to them after a bit, where did you all get this teaching from? And the simple answer was Singapore. But your major problem in Singapore is not irresistible force. It's unconditional forgiveness. And I have to say that this third understanding of grace, which can be found in America, is spreading throughout the world from this city. And I came across it all over South Africa when I was there 2 years ago. And I said, where did you get all this from? And they said, Singapore. I think I'm saying enough for you to recognize this error when you come across it. It is widespread. It originated in America, but it's got a huge hold here in Singapore and is spreading through the internet throughout the world. And everywhere I go to preach, I come across it.
What David Pawson had said pointed to the relevance of what I said. Singapore, instead of being known as the Antioch of Asia, is now more popularly and shamefully known as the world's #1 exporter of the Joseph Prince's Pseudo-Grace heresy. What David Pawson had said brings to mind that because no concrete action was taken by the Singapore church leadership to warn and stop Joseph Prince from spreading his heresies in Singapore, tragically, they have now engulfed the world. When Joseph Prince's heresies have spread from Singapore to infect the many nations of the world, not a single word of responsibility or apology has come from the Singapore church leadership. Not a single piece of action has been taken to address the issue so far. After how long? After 20 over years. Can you beat that? What is worse is the Singapore church leadership. NCCS and APCCS is still sitting on the Joseph Prince issue as if it is a matter that is relatively unimportant, that doesn't require urgent action. As more and more sheep are being deceived by the day by the heresies of Joseph Prince to their destruction. What a sad day for Singapore Christianity. What an indictment against the national leadership of the Singapore Church, NCCS and APCCS. To the spiritual leaders of NCCS and APCCS, it's about time that you wake up from your deep slumber. It's about time for you to sound the alarm clearly, loudly, and publicly, to warn the church about Joseph Prince's heresies. Keeping quiet to remain respectable and stay out of trouble is no longer the option, as the eternity of souls is at stake. Finally, let me be bold as to say that unless and until the Singapore church leadership, NCCS and APCCS, and the Singapore pastors get this right, acknowledge and settle their sinful neglect about the Joseph Prince issue and act against his heresies, Singapore may not realize her dream to be the Antioch of Asia. Part 2. Ex-New Creation or Church Member. Peter Ho's appeal to NCCS and APCCS to take action against the wolf, Joseph Prince, because it is an urgent matter of life and death, as millions of souls hang in the balance. Peter Ho's open letter to the National Council of Churches of Singapore, NCCS, and the Alliance of Pentecostal and Charismatic Churches of Singapore, APCCS.
Appeal to the National Council of Churches of Singapore, NCCS, and Alliance Pentecostal and Charismatic Churches of Singapore, APCCS. Why am I writing to NCCS and APCCS? I will first start with my indication of trust and appeal to you, to my beloved leaders, pastors, Reverend, Bishop in NCCS and APCCS. I consider all of you as the highly honored and respected ones because you are called to be the guardian of the truth and the doctrine of Christ as you are a Christian too. I believe that you are called by God because you are obviously in a position who can decide, give counsel, and do something that no one else could do in the past. But now, only you can consider doing it, especially in such a time like ours. Joseph Prince always says that the world is full of darkness, but his church will shine brighter and brighter because his teaching is full of light. However, I come with a heavy heart to the council because I see darkness all around us when the darkness is actually spreading from his church, New Creation Church. How can there be light when the light of Christ is craftily, intentionally, and constantly shielded by a thick layer of heresies and hypocrisy, where the doctrine of Christ is totally ignored or corrupted? Instead, I see distress and an urgency to break loose from that thick darkness. With the same degree of distress and urgency, many of my ex-New Creation Church friends are now coming to you for your counsel and reply to. I know it's not the usual normal procedure to approach the council when all churches are really functioning as a church and give their own counsel to their own members. But when the church has no biblical sound doctrine, constantly entertain people with heresies, and preaches Pseudo-Grace that has no integrity in the preaching of God's words, we need a voice from the council. 2. My painful journey. It is a painful journey for me and many of my ex-New Creation Church friends to come to the full realization that Joseph Prince is a heretic and a false teacher when we have trusted him as our pastor or shepherd and when we thought he would really care for our spiritual well-being. But it turns out that his heresy would bring destruction and bankruptcy to us, both spiritually and financially, as testified recently by Simon Ho, who is also an ex-New Creation Church members too. It is not easy for many who have experienced bankruptcies, legal proceedings, financial failure, marriage failure, health issues, mental breakdowns, and spiritual attacks to come out and warn others against Joseph Prince's heresies. I'm still in the process of painful recovery and restoration. After many years of believing and trusting in a wrong shepherd or wolf instead, I believe that all my ex-New Creation Church friends are now suffering and would have their own story to tell too. But I will highlight my own first at this moment. I'm married with a beloved wife. We started to attend New Creation Church regularly in 1999. After about 6 months, I sensed that something was very wrong. Although I could not really pinpoint any serious heresies at that time, I knew that Joseph Prince had no genuine love for the Lord and no love for the words of the Lord. I tried to explain it to my wife, but every time it would end up in a heated argument or even a quarrel. I believe after that, she would secretly contact the church leaders or pastors for counsel or advice, and she would always come back with very, very legitimate answers or questions like, "You criticize Joseph Prince, but how many souls have you saved? Or if my legs are not healed, it's because of you. Can you bring me to Pastor Henry healing service, or at least take the Holy Communion with me to encourage my faith?" I became so tired of this psychological game played by New Creation Church between me and my wife that I had to say to myself, enough is enough. And since that day, in 2000 onwards, I've never discussed anything with her about Joseph Prince, New Creation Church matters, or spiritual things. Somehow, we have come to an unspoken understanding that I will not question her about her involvement and giving to New Creation Church, giving to purchase Joseph Prince books, giving to subscribe to his apps, giving to purchase his Holy Communion elements, and she will not force me to join her in any church events too. Although I allowed her to use our house for the care group meetings, and I will attend the worship services from 2000 to 2019 until COVID 2019, which was really a great relief to me. I practically closed myself from all physical and social communion with the people in New Creation Church. However, unknown to New Creation Church leaders and even to Joseph Prince himself, this has given me a long time, enough time to observe everything, not as an outsider, but as a member inside the church. I noticed that most of the members still worship Joseph Prince as their great shepherd and the anointed ones who can never be wrong. But I would consider him as a heretic, rebel, and liar who never follows or obeys the doctrine of Christ. 3. Urgent matter of life and death. Reverend George Ong and several pastors have written many open letters to the council regarding the heresy of Joseph Prince, so I'm not going to repeat what is already said and known publicly in both their letters and the public website, which has already provided ample proofs, testimony, comments, video clips relating to Joseph Prince's heresies. I hope that now you can see more clearly why we can no longer ignore it when God has revealed many things that could be critical and crucial to our church community now. Like Mordecai in the Bible, Reverend George Ong is not someone in power or any mega church pastor. He's just a man who is leading a small minority of people, mainly the ex-New Creation Church people and my friends who received the same revelation as him too. However, we are aware that the beloved Church of God consists of many of our brethren and loved ones are going to be deceived and led to destruction by an evil character who has no doctrine, no law, no love of Christ. To many church leaders, the decision to do nothing or the delay to do anything might not cost much to them, but to us is an urgent matter of life and death, when millions of people, including our loved ones, are being led astray without the light of Christ or doctrine of Christ. 4. My appeal. My question to the council now is what I encounter in New Creation Church something good, normal, or healthy in a church community, in your opinion? If your answer is good and normal, I have come to the wrong council. However, if you think that we need to do something, we hope that you could help us and take immediate action to do what is necessary. Thank you.
George Ong's response to Peter Ho's message to NCCS and APCCS. In the likes of what Peter Ho said to NCCS and APCCS, let me quote what Jeffrey Teo, another ex-New Creation church member, wrote in his testimony, which was featured on my website.
It's time to stand up to contend against Joseph Prince's heretical gospel that is leading the masses to hell. I can no longer sit on the fence, as this is a heaven and hell issue. After coming out of Joseph Prince's false gospel, I must be responsible to warn others. May I rouse you to do your part in exposing Joseph Prince the wolf and to warn others of such a deceptive doctrine that could lead people to the eternal fires of hell.
If Peter Ho and Jeffrey Teo, both ordinary laymen, are seized with a passion and have the courage to warn others of Joseph Prince's heresies, which could lead people to the lake of fire, why have NCCS and APCCS, who are the shepherds of God's flock, and who are theologically trained to tell a heretic from a true preacher of the gospel, continue to maintain their strange silence? For the national spiritual leaders of Singapore, NCCS and APCCS, to insist on keeping silent because of self-preservation when droves of souls are being led to hell by Joseph Prince's heresies, is not only inexcusable but also intolerable and abominable. Do these spiritual leaders in NCCS and APCCS have a conscience that one day they will stand before God to answer for their cowardice of not calling Joseph Prince out as a wolf and thus seeing the multitudes of souls who are being destroyed in hell? The following are 115 individuals representing themselves and supporting the open letter written and message delivered about Joseph Prince by Peter Ho to NCCS and APCCS. If you wish to support all 3 open letters to be released, please write as follows. I, Joshua Lim or Tanseng Lee, agree to place my name in support of all the open letters and messages delivered by representatives of the team to NCCS and APCCS. Part 3. The difference between Charlie Kirk's and Joseph Prince's conception of discipleship is the difference between obeying Christ's command in the Great Commission and rebelling against it. In a sermon, Charlie Kirk said,
I don't agree with evangelization, really, to be honest.
You don't believe in Christianity. Go and make disciples of all nations was literally the last thing that Christ said. You don't believe in Christianity. Go and make disciples of all nations was literally the last thing that Christ said. You don't believe in Christianity. Go and make disciples of all nations was literally the last thing that Christ said.
In a sermon, Joseph Prince said,
And the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. What are you? You're not a disciple anymore. The disciples are now called Christians. So he renamed the disciples for the first time in Acts again. He named them what? The disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. So which is more important? The disciples are now, the names are changed to Christians. We should be calling each other sons of God or Christian.
While Charlie Kirk correctly sees discipleship as representing Christianity and evangelization as similar to making disciples, Joseph Prince makes the utterly false statement that the word Christians has replaced the word disciples, and that believers are now not to be called disciples, but Christians. By doing that, Joseph Prince is literally rebelling against one of the core doctrines of Christ, discipleship or making disciples. Anyone who dares to preach against discipleship, the heartbeat of Christ, has got to be a heretic. I am sure that NCCS and APCCS are certainly aware of this. Then, why have they chosen to be silent? And why aren't they calling Joseph Prince out as a heretic when Christ's main doctrine and heartbeat is under attack? Is it not clear to NCCS and APCCS that anyone such as Joseph Prince, who dares to attack and demean disciple-making which is commanded by the Lord Jesus, who is God himself, in the Great Commission, has got to be a heretic who is of an Antichrist spirit, and he is to be denounced in the strongest possible terms? Part 4. How Charlie Kirk's memorial is changing Mike Winger. In a teaching session, Mike Winger said,
The memorial was amazing and complicated. And it felt to me, this is, I think, a bit of an unhealthy feeling. It felt to me as though I should focus primarily on it being complicated, when I think the most important part is the part of it that was amazing. Does that make sense? These challenges that I'm about to unpack, they can get you to actually set aside the goodness of what just happened and the amazing thing that's going on. And I'm not going to do that. I want to highlight it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the amazing stuff. The fact that we had so many people gathered together for a Christian memorial, and I do believe it was a Christian memorial. If you disagree with me on that, it's not that I'm not aware of what you think. I just think we're We don't agree on this. I think that was a very, very much a Christian memorial. It was more Christian than most Christian funerals. That's the amazing part. Okay, you want to talk about Donald Trump? We'll talk about it. Give me a minute. I don't think that takes away from it, actually. I think it kind of provided a necessary contrast. At any rate, this is an event where the gospel was preached and proclaimed in detail to probably this is crazy to think this, probably the largest audience in human history. Probably the loudest, most heard gospel presentation in the history of our world. If not, it's up there, but it's probably the number one. It broke ratings and stuff. It went all over the place. There's people watching it in other countries around the world, and it was bold gospel. Frank Turek brought a bold gospel presentation. Even Catholics, right? Now, forgive me, guys. Some of you are going to be offended by this, but even Catholics got up and provided a bold, in some cases like Rubio, a bold gospel proclamation. They did this. And it was awesome. I might be able to show you guys something on this. I'll see if I can work on that while I'm talking. So the gospel going out, it was complicated. I'll get to that later. Don't take away from the fact that it was amazing because it was complicated. That's one of the first things I'll say. Just that. Just don't take away from the fact that it was amazing merely because it was complicated and there was some bad along with the good. But the event was stunning. The memorial. Here was an event that was blazing worship, that non-believers were coming to Jesus because of this event. People gave their lives to Christ. Our churches had a ton of people that literally showed up that Sunday because of Charlie Kirk and his impact, because he put his Christianity first foot forward. Now, along with that comes like all these political things, and some you might disagree with, some I might disagree with, but I'm not going to ignore that this is a guy who put his faith first, he put his Christianity first, and he boldly went out there, and look at the impact his boldness, that's a big word there, his courage had. And man, I'm just reminded that courage is a virtue, and that boldness is what they prayed for in Acts chapter 4. Give us boldness. We need boldness. I think Christians need to apply more boldness. I don't want to feel like I'm lecturing the world here. There's plenty of believers who do this. I think that as a whole, we want to do it more. The event caused people to go to your church. They went because of the impact of this guy and what God was doing through it. That's amazing. I consider Charlie Kirk a martyr. I made a video where I talked about the specific reasons. I made a case for it. And I do believe that's very much true. They say the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And I mean, look at the effect of his death. He gets killed because probably most likely I'm fairly confident because he held fast on trans issues and had Christian opinions of homosexuality and things like that. He was killed for those things. And then a bunch of people get saved as a result. And they did it to her husband before. Charlie Kirk, there was all these rumors about him. You could say, oh, I wouldn't have said it that way, or I think he was too harsh here. Or maybe I even disagree with him on some of his views. But what you can't do is call him a racist or a bigot or a guy that's trying to go out and spread hate. These are complete lies, complete and utter lies.
If you wish to view the longer version of Mike Winger's video, please see the description below.